Freezing human, let me in. HFY Sci-Fi story about humanity's greatest strength, blood on the desert sand. The bullet tore through Jack Harper's shoulder before he heard the shot. He hit the ground hard, sand filling his mouth as his horse screamed and bolted into the canyon. Blood soaked through his shirt, hot and fast. Another shot cracked the rock inches from his head. Jack rolled behind a boulder, his right arm useless, his left hand fumbling for his revolver. 3 riders emerged from the ridge above, their faces hidden by dust and shadow. He recognized the lead horse, a black stallion with a white blaze. It belonged to Cole Bennett, the man who had sworn to kill him. Jack had known this day would come. 2 weeks ago in Red Valley, he had testified against Bennett's gang after they murdered the banker and his wife. The judge had believed Jack's account. Bennett and his men had escaped before the marshal could arrest them, but not before Bennett looked Jack in the eye and made his promise. Now here they were, 20 miles from nowhere, and Jack was alone with 1 working arm and 6 bullets. The riders spread out, moving down the canyon walls like wolves. Jack counted his options. He could try to run, but his shoulder was bleeding badly and he would not make it far on foot. He could surrender, but Bennett did not take prisoners. He could fight, but 3 against 1 were poor odds even when a man had both arms. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Jack's canteen lay 50 feet away near where his horse had been tied. His throat was already dry. Bennett's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "You should have kept your mouth shut, Harper. Now you die out here where nobody will find you." Jack did not waste breath on answers. He checked his revolver. 6 shots. He needed to make each one count. The riders were moving carefully now, using the rocks for cover. They knew he was wounded. They could afford to be patient. Jack shifted his position, biting back a groan as pain shot through his shoulder. He could see movement to his left, one of Bennett's men trying to flank him. Jack steadied his left hand against the rock and waited. The man moved again, exposing his leg. Jack fired. The shot caught the rider in the thigh, and he went down screaming. 5 bullets left. The other 2 riders opened fire, bullets sparking off the rocks around Jack's position. He pressed himself flat against the boulder, feeling the heat radiating from the stone. His vision swam for a moment. Blood loss. He was running out of time. Bennett and the remaining rider had gone quiet, which meant they were moving. Jack risked a glance around the boulder. Nothing. He pulled back just as a bullet gouged the rock where his head had been. They were close now. Jack heard footsteps crunching in sand coming from his right. He turned, raising his revolver, but his injured shoulder screamed and his aim wavered. The rider appeared from behind a rock pile, grinning, his gun already trained on Jack. Before either man could fire, a rifle shot cracked from somewhere up the canyon. The rider jerked and fell, blood spreading across his chest. Jack stared in confusion. Someone else was here. Another shot rang out, and he heard Bennett curse and scramble for cover. Jack used the distraction to drag himself behind a larger boulder, leaving a trail of blood in the sand. His shoulder was on fire, and his left hand shook as he tried to keep his revolver steady. He peered around the rock and saw a figure moving along the ridge carrying a rifle. The stranger wore a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. Bennett fired twice at the ridge, but the stranger had already moved. Jack heard the lever action of a rifle being worked, then another shot that sent Bennett diving behind his dead horse. The black stallion lay on its side, killed by a stray bullet. Bennett was pinned down now, trapped between Jack and the stranger on the ridge. Jack could see the outlaw's face, twisted with rage and fear. The stranger called down from the ridge, her voice clear and steady. "Bennett, you are done. Throw out your gun." Jack blinked. A woman. The stranger was a woman. Bennett's response was a bullet that whined off the rocks near her position. She did not flinch. Instead, she fired again, and this time Bennett cried out. Jack saw him clutch his leg. Jack pushed himself upright, using the boulder for support. His vision was narrowing, dark spots dancing at the edges. He had to end this now before he passed out. He stepped out from cover, his revolver raised in his left hand. Bennett saw him and tried to bring his gun up, but his wounded leg betrayed him. Jack fired. The bullet took Bennett in the chest. The outlaw fell back against the dead horse and did not move again. The canyon fell silent except for the moaning of the first man Jack had shot. Jack's legs gave out and he sat down hard in the sand. The woman descended from the ridge with careful steps, her rifle ready. As she approached, Jack could see she was young, maybe 25, with sharp green eyes and sun-darkened skin. She kept her rifle pointed at Bennett's body until she was sure he was dead. Then she moved to Jack. "You are bleeding badly," she said. Jack managed a weak smile. "I noticed." She knelt beside him and examined his shoulder with practiced hands. "The bullet went through. You were lucky." Jack did not feel lucky. He felt like he was dying. The woman pulled a canteen from her belt and held it to his lips. Drank slowly. He obeyed, the water tasting like salvation. "Who are you?" Jack asked when he could speak again. The woman was already tearing strips from her shirt to bandage his wound. "My name is Katie Morgan. I have been tracking Bennett for 3 months. He killed my brother in Carson City." Jack winced as she pressed the cloth against his wound. "You are a bounty hunter." Katie shook her head. "I am just someone who believes in justice." Bennett needed to answer for what he did. She worked quickly, binding his shoulder tight to slow the bleeding. Jack watched her face, seeing the hard set of her jaw, the determination in her eyes. She had the look of someone who had seen too much death too young. When she finished, she helped him to his feet. "Can you ride?" she asked. Jack looked around the canyon. "I do not have a horse anymore." Katie nodded toward the ridge. "I have 2. One belonged to my brother. You can use it." They made their way slowly up the canyon, Jack leaning heavily on Katie. The wounded man had stopped moaning. Katie checked on him briefly, then moved on. "He will live long enough to face a judge," she said. "That is more than he deserves." Jack did not argue. His shoulder throbbed with every step, and he focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Katie's horses were tied in a sheltered spot beyond the ridge. She helped Jack into the saddle of a chestnut mare, then mounted her own horse, a gray gelding. They rode east toward the town of Copper Springs, leaving Bennett and his men behind in the desert. Jack knew the marshal would send men to collect the bodies and the survivor. Right now, all he cared about was staying conscious until they reached a doctor. The sun was setting when they finally saw the lights of Copper Springs in the distance. Jack swayed in the saddle, his vision blurring. Katie rode close beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. "Almost there," she said. "Hold on a little longer." Jack held on because he had no choice. He had survived Bennett's ambush, but only because a stranger with a rifle and a score to settle had been watching over the canyon that day. Sometimes he thought justice comes from unexpected places. They rode into Copper Springs as the stars began to appear overhead. The desert night was cold, but Jack barely felt it. All he felt was the steady rhythm of the horse beneath him and Katie's presence beside him, guiding him toward help. The blood on the desert sand would dry and blow away, but the memory of what happened in that canyon would stay with him forever. Jack Harper woke 3 days later in a bed at the Copper Springs boarding house. His shoulder was bandaged properly now, and the fever that had gripped him for 2 days had finally broken. Dr. Lewis stood by the window, cleaning his instruments. "You are lucky that woman got you here when she did," the doctor said. "Another hour and you would have been beyond help." Jack tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Where is she?" he asked. The doctor shrugged. "She left the morning after we patched you up. Said she had business elsewhere." Jack lay back against the pillow, disappointed. He had wanted to thank Katie properly, to understand why she had saved him. The door opened and Marshal Frank Coleman stepped in, his badge catching the sunlight. "Harper, good to see you awake. I need your statement about what happened with Bennett." Jack told him everything from the ambush to Katie's intervention. Marshal listened carefully, taking notes in a worn leather book. When Jack finished, the Marshal closed his book and sighed. "Katie Morgan has been on Bennett's trail for months. Her brother was a deputy in Carson City. Bennett shot him in the back during a bank robbery. She resigned from her job as a school teacher and learned to track and shoot. Some folks call her crazy, but I call her determined." Jack absorbed this information. "She saved my life," he said simply. The Marshal nodded. "She saved a lot of lives by stopping Bennett. His gang has been terrorizing towns from here to the Colorado border." He paused at the door. "She left something for you." He pulled an envelope from his coat and handed it to Jack. Inside was a brief note in neat handwriting. "Harper, you did the right thing testifying against Bennett. The world needs more people willing to stand up for what is right, even when it is dangerous. Take care of that shoulder." The note was signed, simply, Katie. Jack read the note twice, then folded it carefully and placed it on the bedside table. He spent the next 2 weeks recovering in Copper Springs, his shoulder healing slowly but surely. The town had received word that the surviving member of Bennett's gang had been arrested and would stand trial. Justice, Jack thought, moved slowly, but it moved. He wondered where Katie Morgan was now, whether she had found peace after avenging her brother. When Jack was finally strong enough to ride, he settled his bill at the boarding house and prepared to leave. He had a small ranch waiting for him 2 days south and work that needed doing. But before he left town, he stopped at the general store and bought supplies for a long journey. The store owner, an old woman named Martha, wrapped his purchases in brown paper. "Heading home?" she asked. Jack shook his head. "Not yet. I have something I need to do first." He rode west, following the trail Katie had mentioned in passing to the Marshal. She had been heading toward the Arizona territories, tracking rumors of another outlaw who had connections to Bennett's gang. Jack did not know if he would find her, but he felt compelled to try. She had given him his life back. The least he could do was offer his help if she needed it. The Arizona territories were harsh and unforgiving. Jack traveled through desert valleys and rocky canyons, stopping at small towns to ask about a woman traveling alone with a rifle. Most people remembered her. She had a way of making an impression. In a town called Dry Creek, a barkeeper told Jack that Katie had been there 5 days ago asking about a man named Dutch Kimball. "He is bad news," the barkeeper said. "Runs with a gang of cattle thieves and worse. She is going to get herself killed going after him alone." Jack pushed on, his shoulder still aching but functional. He found Katie's trail leading into the Painted Desert, a vast expanse of colorful rock formations and treacherous terrain. He followed the tracks of her horses, noting how carefully she moved, always choosing the high ground, always watching her back trail. She was learning fast, becoming the hunter she needed to be. 3 days into the Painted Desert, Jack spotted smoke rising from a canyon ahead. He approached carefully, his hand on his revolver. As he rounded a bend, he saw Katie's camp. She sat by a small fire, cleaning her rifle. Her horses were tied nearby, alert but calm. She looked up as Jack approached, her hand moving to her gun, then relaxing when she recognized him. "You should be resting that shoulder," she said without preamble. Jack dismounted and led his horse to the camp. "I rested enough." He sat across the fire from her, meeting her eyes. "I came to help." Katie steadied him for a long moment. "This is not your fight, Harper." Jack smiled slightly. "You made it my fight when you saved my life. I pay my debts." Katie set her rifle aside and poured coffee from a battered pot. "Dutch Kimball and his gang are holed up in a ranch 10 miles from here. There are 6 of them. I've been watching them for 2 days, learning their patterns." Jack accepted the coffee gratefully. 6 against 2 are better odds than 3 against 1. Katie almost smiled. "You can barely lift your arm." Jack rotated his shoulder experimentally. "It is getting better every day. And I shoot with my left hand now." They talked through the night, planning their approach. Katie had done her research thoroughly. Kimball's gang controlled a stolen ranch, using it as a base for their cattle rustling operations. They sold the stolen cattle across the border, making a fortune while honest ranchers suffered. Katie's brother had been investigating the gang when Bennett killed him. Taking down Kimball would finish the work her brother started. As dawn broke, Jack and Katie broke camp and rode toward the ranch. They left their horses a mile away and approached on foot, using the desert terrain for cover. The ranch was a collection of weathered buildings surrounded by corrals full of cattle bearing different brands. 6 horses stood tied near the main house. Smoke rose from the chimney. The gang was home. Kitty positioned herself on a ridge overlooking the ranch with her rifle. Jack circled around to approach from the rear. They had agreed on a signal. When Jack fired a shot into the air, Katie would start picking off any gang members who showed themselves. It was a simple plan, and simple plans were often the best. Jack reached the back of the main house without being spotted. He could hear voices inside, men laughing and arguing over cards. He checked his revolver one more time, then fired a shot into the sky. The effect was immediate. The voices inside went silent, then erupted in shouts. Jack heard chairs scraping and boots hitting the floor. The back door burst open and a man rushed out, gun drawn. Jack shot him in the leg and he went down. From the ridge, Katie's rifle cracked. Jack heard a man scream from the front of the house. 2 more gang members came through the back door, firing wildly. Jack dropped to the ground and rolled behind a water trough. Bullets thudded into the wood above his head. He returned fire, hitting one man in the shoulder. The other retreated back inside. Katie's rifle spoke again, methodical and accurate. Jack heard glass breaking and more shouting. He reloaded quickly, his wounded shoulder protesting but holding. A bullet punched through the water trough, sending a spray of water over him. He fired back through the hole, rewarded by a cry of pain. 3 down, 3 to go. Dutch Kimball's voice roared from inside the house. "Who is shooting at us? Show yourselves like men." Katie's answer was another rifle shot that splintered the doorframe. Jack used the distraction to move closer, reaching the corner of the house. He could see the front now where 2 bodies lay in the dust. Katie's work. That left Kimball and 1 other man. The front door opened and someone threw out a white cloth tied to a stick. Kimball's voice called out again, calmer now. "Whoever you are, you have made your point. Let us talk about this." Katie did not respond. Jack stayed silent. Talking was not what they had come for. After a moment, Kimball cursed. "Fine. Have it your way." The last 2 gang members came out shooting, one through the front door and one through a window. It was a desperate play, and it failed. Katie shot the man coming through the door before his boots hit the porch. Jack caught the other man in mid-leap from the window, his bullet finding its mark. Both men fell hard and did not get up. The ranch fell silent. Jack waited, watching the house for any movement. After 5 minutes, he called out, "Kimball, it is over. Come out with your hands up." No response. Jack looked up at Katie's ridge. She shook her head, indicating she had no shot. Jack would have to go in. He approached the front door carefully, his gun ready. The door stood half open, swinging slightly in the desert breeze. Jack pushed it wider with his foot and stepped inside. The interior was dark after the bright sunlight, and Jack blinked as his eyes adjusted. He saw an overturned table, cards scattered across the floor, and blood. But no Kimball. A floorboard creaked behind him. Jack spun, but he was too slow. Kimball emerged from a side room, his gun raised. They stared at each other for a frozen moment. Then a rifle shot crashed through the window and Kimball jerked backward, the gun falling from his hand. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then collapsed. Jack stepped outside and waved to Katie. She descended from the ridge and joined him at the ranch house. Together, they checked each of the fallen gang members. All were either dead or too wounded to pose a threat. Katie stood over Kimball's body, her face expressionless. "This is for you, Daniel," she said quietly, speaking to the brother who could not hear. They spent the rest of the day securing the ranch and tending to the wounded. Jack rode to the nearest town and returned with the marshal and a deputy. The stolen cattle were identified and arrangements were made to return them to their rightful owners. The wounded gang members were arrested and taken to face justice. By sunset, it was finished. The marshal shook Katie's hand. "Your brother would be proud of what you have done here." Katie nodded, but Jack could see the weariness in her eyes. She had spent 3 months hunting the men responsible for Daniel's death. Now that it was over, she looked lost. Jack understood. Vengeance filled a hole in the heart, but when it was satisfied, the hole remained. That evening, Jack and Katie sat by a fire outside the ranch house. The marshal and his men had left, taking the prisoners with them. Tomorrow, Katie would ride back to Carson City to close the final chapter on her brother's death. Jack would head south to his ranch and the life that waited for him there. But tonight, they shared coffee and silence under the desert stars. "Thank you for coming after me," Katie said eventually. "You did not have to." Jack shrugged his good shoulder. "Yes, I did. You saved my life. Besides, some fights are worth joining." Katie smiled, a real smile this time, not the hard expression she had worn while hunting. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe they are." They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their lives before everything changed. Katie told him about teaching school, about her students and the joy she had found in shaping young minds. Jack told her about his ranch, about the hard work of raising cattle and the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. They talked about Daniel and the kind of man he had been, brave and principled to the end. They talked about Bennett and Kimball and the price of justice. As the fire burned low, Katie asked the question Jack had been expecting. "What will you do now, Harper?" Jack stared into the coals. "I will go back to my ranch, try to build the life I had before all this started. And you?" Katie was quiet for a moment. "I do not know. I cannot go back to teaching. I am not the same person I was." Jack nodded. "None of us are. But that does not mean we cannot find a new path." Katie looked at him thoughtfully. "Your ranch. Do you run it alone?" Jack smiled. "I have 2 hired hands, but they are getting old. I could use someone good with a rifle to help keep rustlers away." Katie raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job, Harper?" Jack met her gaze. "I am offering you a chance to build something instead of tearing things down. There is work to be done, honest work. And the desert is beautiful when you are not tracking killers through it." Katie did not answer immediately. She stared up at the stars, considering. Finally, she spoke. "I will ride with you to your ranch, see if it is a place I could stay. But I make no promises, Harper." Jack smiled. "I would not expect any. Promises are for people who know what tomorrow brings. We just have to figure it out as we go." They left the ranch at dawn, riding south through the desert as the sun painted the rocks in shades of gold and red. The blood on the desert sand was behind them now, the debts of the past paid in full. Ahead lay uncertain roads and unknown challenges, but they would face them together, 2 people who had found purpose in the hardest of ways. Jack's shoulder ached as they rode, a reminder of how close he had come to dying in that canyon. But the ache also reminded him that he was alive, that he had been given a second chance. Katie rode beside him, her rifle across her saddle, her eyes scanning the horizon with the caution of someone who had learned that danger could come from anywhere. But there was something else in her expression now, something that had not been there before. Hope. The ranch appeared on the third day, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley with a stream running through it. Jack's hired hands, two older men named Pete and Sam, came out to greet them. They eyed Katie with curiosity, but asked no questions. Jack introduced her simply as a friend who would be staying for a while. Pete nodded and showed her to the bunkhouse. Sam started telling Jack about everything that had happened while he was away. Katie settled into ranch life with surprising ease. She learned to work cattle, to mend fences, to handle the daily challenges of keeping a ranch running. In the evenings, she would sit on the porch with Jack, and they would watch the sunset over the desert. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. The nightmares came less frequently as the weeks passed. One evening, 2 months after they arrived at the ranch, Katie turned to Jack. "I think I will stay," she said, "if the offer is still open." Jack smiled. "It is." Katie nodded. "Good, because I have been thinking. This place could use a schoolhouse. There are families in the valley, and their children need education." Jack considered this. "You want to teach again?" Katie's eyes shone. "I want to build something good, something my brother would have been proud of." They built the schoolhouse together that winter, with help from the neighboring ranchers. It was a simple structure, one room with a wood stove and benches, but it was enough. Katie opened the school in the spring, and children came from miles around. She taught them reading and writing and arithmetic, but she also taught them about justice and courage and standing up for what was right. Jack watched her come alive again, finding purpose beyond vengeance. He saw her smile more often, heard her laugh at the children's antics. The hard edge that had defined her while she hunted killers gradually softened, replaced by the warmth of someone who had found her way back to the light. Years passed. The ranch prospered. The school grew. Jack and Katie became fixtures in the valley, respected and trusted by their neighbors. They married in a simple ceremony attended by the whole community, standing together under the desert sky that had witnessed their trials and their triumphs. Pete and Sam cried like babies, claiming the dust was affecting their eyes. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Jack would look at Katie and remember the first time he saw her on that ridge, her rifle ready, her determination absolute. He would remember the blood on the desert sand, the price they had both paid for justice, but mostly he remembered the journey that had brought them here, to this place of peace and purpose. Katie would catch him staring and smile. "What are you thinking about, Harper?" And Jack would smile back. "Just counting my blessings, Katie, just counting my blessings." She would nod, understanding. The past had shaped them, but it did not define them. They had taken the hard lessons learned in violence and turned them into something beautiful. That was their victory, more meaningful than any gunfight. The desert stretched around them, vast and eternal, holding its secrets. Somewhere out there, new struggles were unfolding, new injustices demanding resolution. But here, in this valley, two people who had known darkness had found light. They had learned that justice sometimes required violence, but peace required something harder. It required the courage to build, to hope, to believe that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. Jack Harper had faced death in a canyon and survived because a stranger chose to intervene. Katie Morgan had pursued vengeance across the territories and found something more valuable than revenge. Together they had created a life worth living, a legacy worth leaving. The blood on the desert sand had dried long ago, but what grew in its place would endure for generations to come.